And so with that, I welcome you all to this gatherings event that we call a gathering to think about gatherings. You've all received a welcome package, but I'm going to go through a few protocols before we introduce each other. I am trying to model some of these protocols now. One of these protocols for our captioners, because we do have closed captioning and we do have translation services available. One of these protocols is to try to speak slowly for our captioners and our translators and our graphic recorder and ourselves, our listeners. So if any of us, I've invited the moderators and also the captioners, if we're speaking too quickly, any of us, to just, unmute and ask us, please speak a little more slowly. And if you yourself feel that you would like a colleague to speak a little slowly, please feel that you can do that. My name is Jill Carter Nadishnikas. I am an Anishinaabe and Ashkenazi Kwe, and I am speaking to you from Toronto, the place where the trees grow out of the water. This is a place that has been stewarded by and sustained the Erie, the Petun, the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabeg for thousands of years. I am, my pronouns are she and her. I've got dark brown hair. It's pulled back tightly in a bun. I'm wearing orangey red lipstick and I have big glasses, and my background is kind of a mural with pictographs, clan symbols painted upon it. We're going to ask you to introduce yourselves before we begin, each of you, in this short way. Afterwards, each time we speak hereafter, we may preface our remarks with, "Hi, this is Jill speaking," for anyone who is visually impaired. And when we have finished the thought, perhaps finish by saying something like, "This is the end of my current thought." Or as I might say, because I'm a silly Billy, I might say, "Over and out." But something to indicate finished my current thought. Again, we ask not to speak too quickly. We are trying to, this is an experiment where we are trying to bring Lois Weavers on a long table online. So that our seat, when we wish to take a seat at this long table, and when we're at the table, we are speaking in conversation. When we wish to take a seat at the long table, we turn on our cameras and we unmute ourselves. And there might be a person who wishes to take a seat at the table, but not to speak orally, please you can turn on your camera, activate your thumbs up icon, just click on reactions and put your thumbs up icon emoji, and type your offering into the chat. And then your contribution can be read aloud by a moderator. So if you, at the table. So if you wish not to actually speak, this is an option available to you. If you are witnessing, we are always active, every one of you, and I say chi miigwech for coming. Incoming, you are active. And even when you are witnessing, you are being an active witness. And so when we are witnessing, we can simply, when we've left the table to witness, we can simply turn off our video and mute ourselves. Although I'm not muting myself because I'm still talking. You don't have to caption that, Jen. We have two breaks. One will be at 1:30, and the second break will be 30 minutes before the end of the event. A moderator or myself will count that in. These will be 10-minute breaks. And of course, I say it will be at the 90-minute mark, but if we're in the throes of conversation, I won't interrupt. I'll, I'll, I'll allow the thought to continue. And so it might be at the 95-minute mark. Of course, throughout, we encourage you to take care of your body. And if you wish to break, you can always, again, turn off your camera, turn off your mic, and take a moment to relax and socialize. Or I mean, relax and stretch, or socialize with your family members for 5 moments. We'd like to try to, as it would happen in life, we'd like to try to restrict the table to 10 guests at a time, so 10 active participants. So if you see a space at the table, and jump in, turn on your camera and your mic, and there you are at the table. If you don't see a space, you might jump in anyway. And now there's 11 at the table, but someone who has been at the table, I'm not going to moderate, we're not going to police this and say, get out. But if you're at the table and you go, wow, this table's filling up and I've been here for a while, you may voluntarily think, well, I'll step away for a few moments. From time to time, your moderators may step in and say, there's 4 empty seats at the table. Would anyone like to step in? Or might also step in and say, there's 15 people at the table. Would anybody like to step out and witness for a moment? So that will also happen. I think you are able to see that our wonderful graphic recorder, Adriana Contriana. Adriana, is your camera on right now? Probably. I can't, there's Adriana. Adriana's camera will always be on, and Adriana is our, rather than us being able to draw on our tablecloths, although you might be drawing on your home tablecloth, Adriana is recording our thoughts for us, and will be sharing this beautiful graphic a graphic document with us and interpreting it at the end of this session for us. And we'll be sending the gatherings team both the hard version that she's doing, but also a digital version which you will all receive as your own souvenir, and and to do with as you wish in your own writing and work, with proper credit given to Adriana for this beautiful work that she's doing here. And Adriana will be introducing herself in a moment. I believe that for now, let me just check. This is all I will say. I'll just say one last thing. Please note that by attending this online salon, we all understand that we are being recorded, that this recording will be disseminated throughout the remainder of the conference, that this recording will live in the gatherings public website after the conference, and it is also understood by attendants that all participants have given permission for their involvement to be included in any dissemination. And I am going to stop right now and take a seat as a witness and to ask my fellow participants. And Jenny, you are the actual host at this point. So Jenny, I'll ask you to begin by introducing yourself and then passing, orally passing on the introductions to first our group and then on to all of our wonderful, wonderful guests today.
Lovely, thank you, Jill. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be gathered here together in this digital space. I'm speaking to you today from unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory in Ottawa. I guess, Jill, you wanted us to describe what we look like. I have long brown hair and I talk with my hands a lot, so I'm very animated when I speak. And I speak quickly, and I am working on speaking slowly for our captioners. Jill, was there anything else you wanted us to share in our introductions of ourselves?
No, that's pronouns.
Pronouns. Thank you, Lisa. So I go by she, her pronouns. And I invite you. You have the option of changing your name, how your name appears. So please change your name to what you would like us to address you by. And if you could include your pronouns in that, that would be wonderful. Thank you. So, and if anyone, I'm moderating and your technical support. So if anyone's having any trouble with this platform or with any accessibility issues or anything like that, please reach out to me. I'm here to help. And I'm going to pass to Stephen Johnson.
Hello, I'm Stephen Johnson, he, him, and I am a professor emeritus from the University of Toronto. I thought I should say that. I have silver hair and a silver beard, which used to be much longer until yesterday morning. When I finally, after I think 8 months, managed to get to my barber. And I haven't left the house much in all of those 8 months. And I don't have anything else, I think, to say, except I am very much involved in the Gatherings research project, and I may speak to that later toward the end of this meeting. Thank you.
So introductions are going to be popcorn style. So after you've introduced yourself, I invite you to invite the next person. So Stephen, you get to pick the next person.
Oh, I'm going to ask Paula Dankert then to introduce herself.
Hello. Okay. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Paula Dankert, and I'm a PhD candidate at the Center for Drama, Theater, and Performance. And my pronouns are her, she. I'm a white settler background as far as we know. My father is Australian. We don't know anything about his generations behind him in Australia. My mother is from the Maritimes, Cape Breton, and Irish, mostly Scottish background. And I'm currently speaking to you from Tujage, which is unceded indigenous lands of the Ganyahohaga Nation, and they are the caretakers of the waters and the lands here in Montreal, or Montreal, and which is called Montreal because of Mount Royal, the Royal Mountain. I know it's really funny when you come to Montreal and it looks more like a bump, but anyway, to those from the West Coast. But that's, so that's where I'm speaking to you from. And I think that's the end of my thought. Thank you. Oh, so the next person. Yes, so I will hand the next person over to Lisa.
Thanks, Paula. This is Lisa Aikman. I use she, her pronouns. I am a white lady with very large glasses. And that's all I'm going to say. So I will pass this on to Matt Jones.
Hi everyone, my name is Matt Jones. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Drama, Theatre and Performance Studies. I go by he, him pronouns. Coming to you from Toronto, like many people here. And I am hair free, but I do have a beard, sort of reddish. I'm a white guy. And I'll pass it to Jen Cole.
Who is captioning? Ani, Jen Cole.
I got you, Jen.
Thanks, Jenny. Jen Cole, mixed ancestry, Algonquin, Anishinaabeg, in Mississauga territory, right next to the Odahnawbe River, which bubbles like a beating heart. I have long straight hair and really short bangs. I pass to Leah Dactor, who might.
Hi. Thanks, Jen. And hi, everyone. I'm a white settler intermedia artist and scholar. Right now, I'm a postdoc at York University. I go by she, her. And I have dark brown curly hair and glasses. And right now I'm outside of Winnipeg, where I primarily live. That is, I primarily live in Winnipeg. Right now I'm outside Winnipeg. And this is Treaty 1 territory, which is the lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dene, Dakota, and Métis nations. And where I am right now is more Dakota and Anishinaabe and adjacent to Cree territory and also very close to Treaty 3. And I'll leave it at that, and I'll pass to, has Paula gone yet? Can I pass to Paula?
I've introduced myself. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'm kind of distracted here. Okay, Anna.
Anna, we can't hear you. Nope. No. Anna, would you like to put why don't you put it into the chat and I'll read it aloud? Anna writes, hi everyone, sorry for the sound glitch. My name is Anna. I am a PhD candidate at the Center for Drama, Theatre and Performance Studies, where I specialize in the visual representation of traveling dancers from Eastern Europe. I am a Ukrainian immigrant, and I currently have brown hair pulled back into a tall bun, wearing a dark blue shirt. My background is a bookshelf and a few paintings on a white wall. I would like to pass the word to Rowan. Thank you. This is the end of my thoughts.
Thank you, Anna. Hi, everyone. This is Rohan Kulkarni here. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm joining you from my home in Toronto. I'm currently a PhD student at the Center for Drama, Theatre, and Performance Studies at the University of Toronto. I'm here at the invitation of Stephen, so thank you, Stephen, and Seika as well, with whom I'm working this summer. I will pass on to, oh, I'm a Swedish brown-skinned man with dark black hair, and a beard and glasses. And I will be passing on to Tony.
Thank you, Rohan. Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Nardi. My camera is not working, and neither is my AC. I go by he, him. In Toronto, in my dining room, have medium brown hair. What else? I'm wearing a t-shirt, black t-shirt. And I'm a PhD candidate at the Center for Theatre Performance Studies. And that's about it. And that's in my thought. I'm going to pass this on to Gabrielle.
Thank you, Tony. My camera is also off. My name is Gabrielle. I go by she, her. I am assistant professor adjunct at the University of Lethbridge in southern Alberta. The university is located on traditional Blackfoot Confederacy territory. I have brown curly hair, and right now I'm wearing glasses, and I'm here to help folks who would like assistance to join the meeting in French. So I'll say that last part in French. Mon nom est Gabrielle et je suis ici pour aider les personnes qui souhaiteraient s'exprimer en français. And I'll pass the torch on to Heather.
Thank you, Gabrielle. And hello, everybody. My name is Heather Fitzsimmons-Frey, and I'm speaking to you from Treaty 6 territory in Edmonton, Amisquachee, which is currently home to First Nations and Métis and Inuit people who are caretaking this land that we are privileged to play, work, and study on. I go by she, her. I am a female presenting settler of Swedish, Polish, and Irish descent. I have dark blonde hair pulled back in a messy hot weather braid, and I'm very grateful to be here. I will pass the torch to Virginie.
Hello. Hello, my name is Virginie. I'm speaking from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Chianu First Nation on Vancouver Island. I am from Occitan ancestry, which is southern France. So I'm a white, I guess, immigrant to Canada. I have short hair and that I just cut myself because I didn't want to go to the hairdresser. So sorry, it's very artisanal. I also am very grateful for Jill to have invited us and her colleagues. So thank you very much. I'm done now. Thank you.
Let's pass on to, let's see, who hasn't introduced themselves yet? Jimena.
Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Jimena, and I'm a white immigrant from Argentina who grew up in Mexico. That always seems to surprise people, with very messy, sort of blondish hair right now, bleached by the sun, I guess. And I'm speaking to you from the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississauga of the Credit River. And currently I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Ryerson's School of Performance. And I'm very happy to be here. Also, I'm very happy to collaborate with the Gatherings Project. And thank you to Jill and Stephen and Jen for organizing this long table. And I guess I will pass it on to, let's see who hasn't gone, Alana.
Hi, my name is Alana Garricky, she, her. I am an independent dance artist and scholar based in Vancouver on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I go by she and her. I am female presenting, a white settler with maybe chin length, light brown hair. And behind me is a kind of home library of combination of ecological and performance studies texts. And I wonder if it's time for someone who hasn't yet gone to self-identify, because I'm not sure where we're at. Thanks.
Thank you, Alana. I'm going to invite Dave DeGrow to introduce himself. Dave, are you there? Let's pass to, I'm sorry, I'm probably going to pronounce your name incorrectly. Jean?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, my name is Jeanne Beauvais. Je m'appelle Jeanne Beauvais. Je suis professeure à l'Université de Montréal. I don't know, like, I think I know maybe only two of you on the panel, but I'm very happy to join you. I'm here, I'm now in Quebec City on Innu and Huron-Wendat territory. Actually, from my hotel room window, I can see territory being presently reclaimed by the Huron-Wendat, which is very interesting and very, very rare, I guess. I will probably just be here as an active witness. I'm very much interested in sound archives and in the whole discussion. So maybe I will intervene, but I thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Jan. I invite Laura Lucci to say hello.
Hi, everyone. My name's Laura Lucci. My pronouns are she, her. I am an alumna of the Center for Drama, Theater, and Performance Studies PhD program, and I'm currently a substitute teacher in Buffalo, New York, and a research assistant on Gatherings projects being headed up by Martin Julian and Sasha Kovacs. I'm speaking to you today from Eden, New York, which is part of the Haudenosaunee and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Erie people. And I am a white woman of Italian descent with long brown hair and dark glasses. And I think that's all for me. Who hasn't gone?
Laura, I think that might be everybody. So we're going to invite our visual recorder to introduce herself.
I think Maria.
Maria! Yes, that's right, Maria.
Hello.
Hi,
my name is.
Sorry.
That's okay. So my little picture when my camera is off says, "Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain." So maybe that's why. Yeah. So my name's Maria. I go by she, her pronoun. I'm speaking to you from Toronto, Treaty 13 territory. I'm a white woman. student at the Center for Drama, Theater, and Performance Studies, PhD candidate. And I have kind of grayish chin length hair. I'm not wearing my glasses right now, but I might. And are we done? Do I need to call somebody else? I think we have.
We're gonna meet Adriana now.
Okay.
Thank you, Maria.
Hi everyone, my name is Adriana Contreras. I'm speaking to you from Vancouver, from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And I'm here as part of my work with Drawing Change to be witnessing and graphically recording the conversation that's gonna happen this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are. So throughout the gathering, I'll be listening and taking notes of what's being said, making connections, and it's all gonna live on this paper that is behind me, a large paper that is 4 by 8 feet. And I think I'll backtrack. My pronouns are she, her. I'm wearing blue. I'm a Colombian immigrant, first generation on these lands, brown skin and brown hair that is pulled back in a bun. And just one quick note, because you have different people on camera at one time, if you want to see the recording or the work that I'm doing larger, you can pin my video. You can go on to like the little square of my video on the top right corner, and it'll give you, there'll be 3 dots, and that gives you the option to choose if you want to pin the image. And also, I'll do a walkthrough at the end of the gathering. I might be missing, or maybe is not exactly as accurate of a reflection of something you have said. Please feel free to let me know. I'm very happy to make adjustments. And I think that's it for me. Thank you.
So, Anin, everybody, thank you again for joining us. I'm going to invite people now to take their, those who wish to take their place at the table. And you know how that goes. Cameras on, or a thumbs up and mics on. And Anna, if you're, whatchamacallit, you know, your audio, your mic is not working, just give us a thumbs up. Tony, I know a couple of you, your cameras may not be working. If your camera is not working and you're at the table, I don't know if this will work, but if you just put a thumbs up emoji in your, if you just do your thumbs up emoji in your reactions, we should see that with your name on your little black box, and you can turn your mics on. Anna, you can just give us the thumbs up and chat when you join the table. I've sent you 4 questions that will guide our discussion. Past experience has shown that we never actually, you know, I'm sort of whimsically formulating this as a meal with an appetizer, an entree, a main course, etc. But we won't go in order. Often dessert comes first, or everything, we just take everything and mix it all into one big poutine, right? When we're speaking. So this will be fine. But to start us off, you know, if you have the questions in front of you on your computer, that's good, just to remind you of your thoughts or where you want to go or what you particularly most wish. See, I'm speaking too fast. Most wish to address. We're going to begin with think about what have we, those of us who've visited archives, what have we appreciated? What's good? I think this is a great question because one of the hopes of our group is we also partner with people who run archives. And what a wonderful way to generate ideas. Oh, I heard about this wonderful archive in Europe that does this. Maybe we should take that into our practice or add this into our practice as archivists. So yes, we'll begin with what do you appreciate about archives you have access to do your research? And so I invite people now to join the table. I'm going to put it on speaker's view. Sorry, before we start, Adriana, did you mention how people can highlight you? Yeah, okay, sorry, yes. All right. So.
Hi, Jill, this is Heather speaking.
Yeah.
I'd like to start by saying that one of the things that I appreciate most about archives is archivists. I am so grateful to the people who have directed my attention to archives and particular fonts and ideas. I must say that I have made discoveries in archives that they were not aware of, and yet I think that without their help, I would not have made those discoveries. I think that archivists and people who hold collections, even if they're not in a full archive, you know, people who hold them in their homes or in their hearts if they're doing the work orally, I think these are people we really need to acknowledge.
Thank you, Heather.
I'll go next. This is Stephen speaking, and I just want to echo what Heather says. Absolutely. I guffawed as soon as she started speaking because that was exactly what I would say. The thing I appreciate most is the archivist, which may sound obvious, but not everybody appreciates archivists. It's the idea that the individual who is introducing you to the documentation, the history, whatever it is, the artifact, has a knowledge of its provenance. It means a great deal to me of the history of the thing itself, not just the history that it represents, but the thing and where it came from and who has owned it or who created it. And it's more usually the person who has the oversight of that object or that document who understands that. And to me, without that knowledge, I'm nothing when I start to read it or look at it. And I'd say as a corollary to that, real access to the materials that are under the care of that archivist is something I really appreciate. Archives where you can actually look at the full range of what it is that's there to look at, that surrounds the subject that you want to investigate. And I say that, I know it's jumping ahead, but because there are some archives that I've visited where I only get to look at one small thing at a time and nothing in its context, and there's less of an understanding when I do that. So being able to lay everything out in front of me, big as life, is a great thing. I hope that wasn't talking too fast. That's it for me.
So it's Maria, and I'll try to speak slowly enough. I was recently working at the archive in Elgin County, kind of south of London, shore of Lake Erie. And one thing I noticed that it's like their archive and their heritage museum as well. One thing I noticed that I really appreciated was the way they involved their community. So I was working with a film that had been donated, and the first thing they did was to put it sort of on a video device and have it playing all the time in their heritage museum. And when I ended up doing interviews there, they just left the museum open, and people were just wandering in and out and contributing. what they had to contribute. And I thought that was wonderful. I thought I guess under some circumstances it would make sense to limit access or to be really careful. But in this case, kind of creating that flow with the community was a great thing. And I wonder how often that happens and whether it should be happening more. And I think that's the end of my thought.
Thank you, Maria. It's Jill speaking. I am thinking we have very few people at the table right now. So although we haven't left this first question, I want to open it up to perhaps or add in, fold in a second question. Are there improvements or alterations that you could envision that might better facilitate your work? As researchers, we appreciate that these materials are often, are there, have been kept for us, are being stewarded for us. But what might facilitate our, better facilitate our work? Or are there things that we've run into where we think, oh, if only it were like this, if only it were more accessible, or if only the way things are cataloged, made more sense to me, or offered me a larger holistic picture of what is available. If only that were in place, things would have been easier, or be easier. And I'd like to invite more people to join the table. And it's Jill still speaking. So I'm going to start from, I guess, my perspective as an Indigenous researcher, and as a researcher, thinking about, I guess, some of the things that I've encountered in my research. One of the things that I've encountered, and this was during 2 visits to an archive of Native American women playwrights, which is stewarded by, sorry, let me get the name straight, Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. The first time I was invited to Miami University, I was very excited because I thought I was going to Florida in February. So it was a big shock when I discovered that wasn't the same Miami. So one of the issues I have with, or that I encountered with this archive, was its distance. And for myself, as a privileged researcher, as someone who could get some funding, and also had sort of, well, I had my research partners telling me where their stuff was, living research partners inviting me to visit this place actually with them. I was in a very privileged position. I may have never known where these materials were housed. I have since found out that all of the materials pertaining to, well, I'll say Spider-Woman Theater, because these are my research partners, are not housed there. They are housed in several archives across North America, and nobody really knows where they all are. Some of these archives are closed to not only the public, but to researchers. And so many of the people in my community who should have access to this seminal work, I mean, not just me as a researcher, but I think of young Indigenous performing arts students, young artists who should be learning from their forebears, from their Indigenous forebears. They may never see these materials. And this is their inheritance, their legacy. So this is one thing I've noticed, thinking about access. A second thing I noticed visiting this archive were that certain photographs of shows were misfiled. And I just happen to know that because that happens to be, my area of specialty. I had become very familiar with the work of Spider-Woman Theater. But when I approached the staff to be helpful and to say, these pictures are misfiled, and so they could cause confusion in the future, I was told to return them exactly where I'd found them, which I refused to do. But I found that a very interesting and troublesome event. Unfinished.
Hi, everyone. This is Jimena speaking. Thank you, Jill, for sharing that. I had one thought from the previous question that I guess also relates to this question, because one of the things that I, as a person who hasn't worked a lot with archives, one of the things I really appreciated was sort of handling real objects and real materials. Especially now that I have to do some of the work I have to do is looking at digital archives, and I really appreciate the handling of like being able to access real tangible things, and the kinds of maybe the kind of imagination or discovery or the mystery of having objects laid out in front of you, and also the other thing I appreciate about that too is how, I guess, how people are have a kind of affective relationship to the archives they work with, which again relates to being able to be there and handle objects in person. But I was thinking too, this question of access, which I know also came up. I'm sorry, maybe I'm speaking too fast. I'll try to go slower. The question of access, which also came up at the last long table, in the sense that how access is very limited on the one hand, and on the other hand, the way that to actually digitize and make archives more accessible, of course, provides more access, but also maybe limits that experience of being able to be in the archive. And so I guess it's a question that is still with me. And that's the end of my thought. Thank you.
Jen speaking. I am working with a local archive with a really beautiful archivist who is really open to sharing materials. And the artifact that I'm working with is a birch bark canoe I found in the shed behind the museum.
And they're letting me work with that canoe, repair her, get her back in the water, make performance dance film with her. My access to that object is like, it's actually huge, especially since I'm not a canoe builder. I don't actually know what I'm doing. They're letting me learn with and through this Jimon, this canoe. And I'm just bringing this up partly to say, if I don't work with that canoe and she's left totally dry in the shed, she'll fall apart. And so in order to keep that being and also that object living, available, accessible for generations to come, able to share her knowledge, she needs to be worked with. And that's true actually of all of the vessels at the Canadian Canoe Museum. They know very well that if we don't get canoes in the water, they just disappear. I think that's the end of my thought for now. Stephen, we can't hear you.
Now you can. It's Stephen speaking, and I'm following up on Jen because although it's as far away from canoes as I could possibly get, it still, the image resonated with me because of other kinds of artifacts, newspaper clippings, old photographs, things that I would call up at archives that were on the one hand falling apart in my hands as I was looking at them, which would be a reason why the archivist would tell me, you know, would protect them and not allow me to look at them. And on the other hand, if the alternative arrangement between the researcher and the archivist would be to work together to preserve that thing. In the case of certain kinds of documents, to tape them back together, to photocopy them, to transcribe them, to do all the things that are necessary to preserve both the original artifact and also the content that's in that artifact. Not unlike the canoe. I mean, you can't, it's no good if it's sitting in a file somewhere and never looked at. It will both never be of any use, but it will also disappear. It won't be preserved if it's hidden away, as I experience it. That's the end of my thought.
This is Alana speaking. I'll jump in. I'm not sure if this belongs in this conversation and this conception of archive, but I'll contribute it and then we can just blow past it. I've been thinking a lot as a dance artist about the embodied archive. So like the movement version of an oral history, and thinking, Stephen and Jen, about your contributions around kind of that ephemeral nature of objects. And I'm currently working on a project where we're starting to think about how to work with various elders to try and think through how to reanimate gestures that maybe belong to old technologies. And just thinking through that, the ephemerality there really too, that that the embodied archive only remains as long as the body. That's really the end of my thought.
This is Jeanne speaking. I'm sorry, my English is not necessarily very good, so I might switch to French. But just listening to you made me think of one thing that's really very nice to use now in archives. We are allowed in many cases to photograph, you know, to use our iPhone or whatever to take pictures of what we're looking at. So it's much faster in a way, because Stephen talked about photocopies, but that was really tedious and very complicated and had to sign in forms and not, you know, now the phone is not as intrusive and it's allowed in many places. Some you still have to sign forms, and I'm talking about Bibliothèque Nationale de France, which maybe some of you have been at. Département des Arts du Spectacle, it's still very complicated, but others like la Bibliothèque Historique de la Ville de Paris, they have a huge amount of photographs, of newspaper clippings, of cahiers de mise en scène, but you can just click on your iPhone and take pictures of, and then you end up with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photographs on your iPhone, and you have to sort them through and find out what's really relevant. And in a way, it's a facilitator because it makes things much easier. You don't have to copy on your computer or find out the little line that interests you. But in the end, I have hundreds of photos on my iPhone that I have taken 2 years ago and still haven't really looked at, because I know they're there. I know I can take them, look at them whenever I want. And in the end, I'm not sure it's more helpful than it actually was before. So that's a good thing, modern technology and personal technology. You can bring your phone wherever you want. And in the end, does it really help? I think it does, but it's tricky. So that's what I just wanted to share with you.
Hi, this is Heather speaking. Thanks, Jean, for that thought about the digitization options that we can do at home or on our own rather than with the help of a digital archive. I think that's a very important point, but I would like to go back to what Jen and Alana were speaking about getting to work with the archive and about animating an archive and embodied archives. And one of the things that I have been doing recently is animating old texts on textbooks on how to do certain kinds of movement vocabulary, and I've been working with young people. And this particular practice, because they were textbooks, is easy. I know that I have permission to do that. But other things I've been wondering about whether I have permission, whether I have the right to try to recreate certain kinds of movements or try to understand them using a physical document or a physical object in an embodied way. And that's something that I think many archives may need to start thinking about, is how do they present that kind of information? That's the end of my thought.
Jen speaking, just very quickly, it's making me think, Jill, about you mucking about in the archive and knowing what your permissions actually were and what the consent protocols were with Spider Woman Theater, and that you would put those documents back where they belong. And I really appreciate that you shared that. Just choosing to dig into maybe a protocol that is truer than the one that is presented by the archive.
It's Jill speaking. It's very interesting to me. And I do wonder, because I wonder what the archive is for. And I know this sounds like I'm working with a group with gatherings. What is she doing here? It sounds like such a you know, a baby question, but I've been, the more I think about this, and I had the opportunity to begin, you know, working with a small community of Indigenous artists, and that community will grow as we move out, putting our minds to these questions and thinking about archives for ourselves and dreaming the archive that at least our artists and our up and coming artists would like to see as a legacy, as a center of stewardship of a legacy and an inheritance and a birthright, not just for the university researcher. And we also have a place in this as university researchers, because we can translate that and publicize and disseminate some of those legacies, right, of any community out to others. But you know, I wonder about some things. For instance, I was told a story by a colleague of mine about I think it's in the Smithsonian. It's I believe it's not in the Museum of the American Indian, but it's in one of the Smithsonian museums. It is a 2-row wampum, and a very early one. And there were several 2-row wampums, obviously, since 1613 that were created between the Dutch and the Haudenosaunee, between the British and the Haudenosaunee, between the British and the Anishinaabe, etc., etc. So the 2-row replicated. So this is an original that is falling apart. And 2 elders, 2 Haudenosaunee elders, went to the museum offering to restore and repair, in other words, replace the degrading, the leather that's degraded, so that the beads will hold together, so that the treaty document will continue to be legible. And the museum didn't want to let them do it because, oh, you know, the original is so sacred. And yet, you know, the question is, so it's a very interesting conception, right? You know, to the elders, it is sacred because it is treaty. But, you know, our Medewin, our medicine people, our knowledge holders, when a piece of birch bark degrades that has pictographs on it, or, you know, birch bark biting, when it begins to degrade, they make a copy. Somebody makes a copy. They get a new piece of birch bark and they put that knowledge in the biting, and they repair that wampum. They polish the covenant chain and repair the wampum belt. They do these things so that that knowledge, that treaty, that agreement, all of those things will, you know, will be passed down through time immemorial and will not be lost, you know, to time, to the degradation of time, as our bodies are, right? And so it's it's a very interesting thing. The spirit, I don't know, and you know, I'm not saying I know. I'm not trying to represent. I'm just representing my own interpretation, my own feeling, my own questions, and not, you know, not some sort of, you know, tribal collective thought. But my own suspicions, feelings, questions around this are, you know, for any community, what is more important? That knowledge that a grandmother is trying to pass down to her great-grandchildren, that a teacher was trying to pass down to students 200 years after his life, that an artist was trying to pass down to other humans or other artists who might take up his mantle, her mantle, their mantle. You know, and at what point you know, when is the, you know, what is of primacy here? Is it the material, the thing that has value, or the spirit of the thing, the spirit and intent of the thing? I don't know, I find it very interesting. And of course, this then comes out into care of things and the way the display of things and the curation or the narrative structure that is created within the archive of those things. Anyway, some thoughts from me, which I'm finished now.
That's helpful to me, Jill, because I'm very new to the archive. I'm still, you know, these sort of baby questions are, I find them very helpful. And I'm still sort of learning what the archive has to offer, or what is the archive anyway. And some of my gathering in terms of work that I've done as a dramaturg in performance and with a lot of elders and different languages was sort of, I thought, I never occurred to me that that was kind of archival work that I was doing, but I'm learning that maybe it is. I have a lot of thoughts. Oh, this is Paula speaking, by the way. Excuse me. I'm thinking about Bill Reed and the totems and the poles and the time when those were being cut down, the Haida poles were being cut down and put into the archive in the museum. And that to me, Jill, is similar to, I think, the question that you raise around the idea of the thing. Is it the thing or the material of the thing, or what makes it living and alive still? And so questions around, I think as a white settler person, one of the things that I struggle with a lot when it comes to the archive is how very often the way something is chronicled or observed or understood is as inanimate. And our concept of inanimacy doesn't help necessarily our relationship to the thing. And where does that thing become real? Is it in the hands of the elders, of the women who are making the wampum live, giving it more of its future, or is it in its state of originality in reference to its past? And so I think that some of those, between those are places of problems, because I think we're gaining some ground in being able to look at artifacts from an archive in dialogue with its own past, or perhaps its own future, or from within the people that have had some history with the artifact, can bring the dialogue into the present, have it speak to an audience or to a spectator, a viewer, in new ways. I guess this idea of original is interesting to me too, because of course, what makes something original, I mean, one thing we know is that the copy makes it the original. Once it's copied, we know it's a, so I think all those, this relationship to the artifact is one of the things, I guess, that I'm sort of thinking about in terms of trying to understand what it is that the archive has to offer. That's the end of my thought.
It's Stephen. There are a couple of things I'd like to follow up on, because I find them both, they just resonate with me. They're very interesting. One of them is Jean's anecdote or history of going into archives and being able to snap 1,000 pictures of things and then take them home, and basically having her own archive, which she also finds difficult to sort through and archive and catalog. But now there are copies, but the copies still help to preserve, in a way, the original. And I've certainly had experiences like that in two very different directions. On the one hand, archivists and owners of original documents that are very, very hesitant about my taking any kind of copy because there is a value to the original that they believe will be diminished by taking a copy. That is, if you take a picture of something and take it away, you might reproduce that, and then people won't come to their archive, or people won't purchase the original, or something. There is something going on that monetizes the original. But then there are the archives that I've been to that have said, no, you can take as many pictures as you like, just leave a copy of everything with us. In other words, they're commandeering me, they're including me as a partner in preserving their archive, because if I take a picture of everything, then they can keep a copy of that, and that's what other people will look at. Of course, preventing them from looking at the original, but that's another issue. And I'm not certain that really how effectively this connects with what Jill was saying, and Paula was saying, and Jen was saying. But just the idea that there are very, very, really different ways of examining this artifact. The artifact, or the thing, has a history to it, but it also has a present moment to it, a present embodied moment. If a historian wants to go back and look at the original leather and the original beadwork, they will understand a particular kind of historical moment. But then again, the thing deteriorates with time, and then you can't, it doesn't have the same kind of existence as people who are going in and saying, but we would like to make it usable now. We would like to make it what it was meant to be, but now in the present moment. So there's a different sense of history, which shouldn't surprise any of us, that there's a different sense of history depending on who's looking at this thing. They're both valid, as are all the ways of looking at history in between, but they can be at odds. So there has to be a way in which to be able to do both, I think, and I don't know what that way is. That's the end of my thought. Again, I'm sorry if I was talking too fast.
It's Jill speaking. I have a question, and this is really for everybody at the table. And everybody who's witnessing too. And it's about, I guess, how do I word this? Don't caption that. Let me think. I guess it's about our attitude towards what I will term things, artifacts. Our attitudes, understandings, sorry, I have bad pronunciation, don't caption that. Our attitudes, understandings of the things we encounter, touch, are they so different? And it feels that they are. It feels that an indigenous understanding of, I'll call it the thing, being anything non-human, is that it is or the thing that seems to be not moving, that seems to be, I guess, in Western terminology, inanimate. Are those attitudes and relationships different than the indigenous view? Our view is that these are living, these are alive in a different way. It is alive, bimatan, as opposed to bimatis. He, she is alive, bimatis, he, she is alive. Bimatan, it is alive. That thing that we call inanimate is alive. It carries spirit. We have relationship. It may require, in fact, it may require to be allowed. It may need to be allowed to degrade and go back into the earth, and perhaps be recopied rather than, varnished over and put under an oxygen-free case, to simply be copied again by real skill, artisans and people who are skilled with the knowledge, both of craftsmanship, of the doing and of the knowing, of the spirit, and let it go. Because to live forever would be torture. Would be torturous. And that, again, we go in and we're not simply asking consent of people, but we're asking consent of the thing itself. Are our attitudes really that different? And I'm really curious. What does it seem to you anyway, the archivist's attitude may be? And what is perhaps your attitude as a researcher? I mean, are these things to be used for your purposes? Is that, and I'm not judging these attitudes, I'm just wondering, I'm really curious, because sometimes I feel I talk and, or we talk, or my friends talk, and, do these just seem like quaint ideas to our colleagues? Something to be perhaps, accommodated for our sake, or something to be considered and really taken on or taken to heart, and would this change the tenor of our processes? And I say our, meaning all the researchers here, of our processes as archivists, of our processes as researchers. Would this improve the work or change the tenor of the work we do, so that it affected communities in a very different way, the communities that we hope to reach and touch and transform and influence? I am finished with my question.
This is Paula speaking, and I've already spoken, so I don't want to take up someone else's turn, but I do this question about are our attitudes towards the thing that different? Excuse me, I may be not getting the question exactly correct, Jill, but the our, the OUR, and attitudes, I'm assuming, Jill, you're asking this question from various positions culturally, in terms of heritage, background, indigeneity, non-indigeneity, for example. And okay, I know when I figured it out that rocks were alive. I know when that happened for me. And it wasn't because I was brought up with teachings or a culture or a practice of any sort that could prepare me for that knowledge. So when I came upon it, the idea of the thing living, that concept was revolutionary to me in everything that I did in my life. And I have a close idea. I've really tried to map this in my own life. And it does affect my work as a researcher and as a dramaturg, because it changes my relationship to objects, and it has changed the way that I can see how things are in relationship to each other. And I guess, Stephen, to your point about the different histories that that brings forward, or even perhaps different futures or possibilities, that has had probably the largest impact on my work, than maybe even larger than anything else. So I know that's not very academic as an observation, but to try to speak to your question, Jill, I guess in my own self, I know there have been differences, because there was a time before, for me, there was a time where I thought, I don't think about inanimacy anymore. I exited that binary. That was a very exciting time, a wonderful thing that happened for me. So the different attitudes I can chart certainly within myself. That's the end of my thought.
I'm wondering if we're taking a break or if it's still possible to.
I'd like you, yeah, you just joined, so I would love you to speak, and then we'll take a break after.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. I just briefly, to build on that, you know, I've been working with traditional songs from my cultural ancestry, and back in Europe, so in France, and I'm talking about Occitan songs. You know, it's very bizarre because what happened is the elders passed away, but before they passed away, like the last ones who had the songs and the knowledge within the songs and the language, they actually offered some of these songs and their knowledge to young musicians who were collecting them in the 70s and 80s. Because they didn't want these songs to die, and the knowledge in the songs and the language and also the ways of life of these elders, very, very different way of life from how people live now in Europe. So there was a very strong break at some point between this old culture, this ancestral culture, and then I guess modern life. So what they did is they recorded the songs, but it was really kind of amateurish kind of things, because they were just young musicians. They went around the countryside and they recorded and recorded on, you know, those old kind of recording devices. And so, and then that was archived in cultural centers in southern France. So I went there and, you know, tried to learn, you know, from these documents, but more importantly, because it's an oral tradition, the way these songs were passed on was in an embodied way from person to person. So what happened is the young musicians that collected, it's called collected, but collectage in French, that gathered those songs that were given to them, I mean, offered to them by these elders. They ended up starting learning them themselves because they were practitioners and they wanted to learn traditional music and continue to practice it. And then they became the source themselves. They became the archive. So the elders passed away and the young musicians became the source because the source itself was in them now. And then they became teachers, and then they started teaching it to the next generation. So all the songs that I know come from people who learned it from people who learned it from other people. So, which is interesting, right? So first of all, it's an embodied archive or repertoire, as you know, Diana Taylor makes the distinction because it's quite different. It's not written. And when musicians who are trained in the Western notation system try to notate these songs and this music, it just doesn't work because there's all kinds of stuff happening orally that cannot be transcribed according to Western standard notation, of course. So the orality of it and the oral archive is super important, but at the same time, it's getting transformed all the time. To go back to what Jill was saying, you know, about do we preserve it in a glass case? When for songs, it's like, do we record it and hold on to the recording and try to imitate that? But then at the same time, it's not alive. And these songs, the idea about the songs that I learned from indigenous, you know, practitioners themselves, that for them, the songs are really alive. And I'm hoping that if we can consider songs as being alive, then there's a chance that they will continue to matter to people and affect them and have a function, a cultural function, and some kind of value, I guess, because they were very, very, very devalued in my culture. So to be able to sing them again, but obviously not in the way that the elders sang them because they've been transformed along the way, means that they're still alive, but in a different form. And maybe they're meant to have their own agency, and we're just meant to try and be a conduit for the songs to continue to be transmitted one way or the other. I'm not sure, that's just my thoughts. I wanted to share that. Thank you.
Many thanks, Virginie. And everybody, thank you. We are going on a break now. Before we go, I would just like to, you know, put in your back pockets for a return. We've already just started to mix it all up and create our poutine. But the next two questions on the list are have you encountered any obstacles or irritants that set back your work or inspired your distrust of an archive you were visiting? And then finally, what are the ethical questions around the practices of collection, curation, and display that inform your approach to confidence and use of the archives that inform your work? You know, certainly these are questions that come up for, you know, the indigenous community, and I would say many racialized and marginalized communities. But again, many of the performing artists and the people that we work with are themselves marginalized, are themselves living precarious lives. You know, ethics, thinking ethically in terms of them and working ethically with them and the legacies that they leave behind is certainly quite important. So with these thoughts in our mind, I invite us to return to the table at 1:55 p.m. my time and 55 p.m. your time. Miigwech. See you all soon. So I see some people, faces, lovely faces at the table. So let's jump in. As we've seen, this conversation is already circling back and forth, and we may actually find ourselves ending with question, more on question 1 or 2, and that's fine. I think we've already started to think about some of the ethical implications, but of course, there are a lot more. Some of my own stories include, when I think about archives, one of the fears I have that's just come up from a circle I did with a group of Indigenous performers based in Dagaranto is this. Many locally based Indigenous theater groups and performers have donated their stuff, the stuff of their performances, the stuff of their sets, scripts, notes, to a university archive in Ontario, which has since closed. So is accepting no more. It accepted so much and no more. So for instance, Native Earth no longer has a place. It gave a great deal of stuff to this archive, and it no longer is able to give anymore because the archive is closed. Or closed is not accepting, I shouldn't say closed, not accepting any more stuff. So one question I have about this is, what happens in 100 years when we're all dead? Sorry, I'm an old gore crow. Don't put that on the transcript. Oh, well, I guess it's being recorded now. Jill is a gore crow. But I think about that a lot, because when I think about archives, I think a lot about my own passing and the passing of people I love and the legacies that have been left. And I think about the future, whether it's young Indigenous people wanting to know about their own performative history in this time and place in the latter day 20th century and early 21st, and 21st century. And I wonder if they'll think, oh my goodness, this is the history of Native Earth from this year to this year, and after which there was no more, or something. The other issue, or the other question that's come up, and that is causing a certain amount of perturbation, is, and perhaps, many of you, we're all, many of us are not only scholars, but we're artists ourselves. And we may have been asked, or may be asked, to donate our stuff, the stuff of us, to an archive for a future generation to review. And one of the interesting things that has come out from the circle that I think of it as recent, because the report, I've just finished the report recently, but the circle was last year I conducted. One of the things that came out, for instance, and I'm not going to name names or identify, but a theater company, a Native theater company had donated, a small collective had donated their stuff, including production stills, some set pieces, etc., to this archive. One of the performers from this collective was doing a project fairly recently, just a couple of years ago, and wished to use one of the production stills from this older show, and this performer was featured in the production still, in this project. project, in this new project. And what happened was this performer went to the collective and said, I would like to use certain photos in which we are all featured from this show in this new project. May I do it? And they said, oh yes, they gave their permissions. They were very happy to support this. So this performer went to Guelph and was not granted access or use of this stuff, of these photos. And I find that very, very strange. And I hear stories. I was very privileged, and I thank Stephen, you know, for the opportunity to have gone out to Victoria at the Gathering Symposium last February, right before everything shut down for COVID, and met some wonderful people and some wonderful Indigenous people, archivists, and had many wonderful conversations with Indigenous and non-Indigenous scholars and artists. And then I was able to hop over to Talking Stick in Vancouver, where you know, because my mind was full of these things, you know, I was also conversing with performers from Australia and New Zealand, Aotea, and of course all over Turtle Island about these things. And of course, these concerns came up over and over, whether they were from community people who are not performers themselves, but looking at wanting to access archives, you know, to see family memorabilia, or from performing artists who not being granted access. And that, to me and to many of us, is a severely disturbing phenomenon. And again, you know, goes against those ethics of ownership, OCAP, ownership, access, possession, and control and possession. No, ownership, control, access, and possession. for Indigenous people, but I guess, you know, the danger also, you know, we have a saying, what happens to me happens to you, right? We may be the canary in the coal mine, but, you know, when the canary dies, the miners die too, right? So, you know, this is not just a question today. It may just affect Indigenous peoples, but not always. Jill is finished.
I would just jump in there to say thank you, Jill. That's it's very important what you've said, and it has to do with the Gatherings Project just generally, and trying to grapple with the ethics. And it speaks to the last, to dessert. You know, I'm trying to stick to the menu a little bit, and the ethics of all of this. Who has ownership over the thing itself, not just objects, but also information, and also recorded interviews, the recordings of folk songs, the recordings of dance, recreations that are then documented in some way. I find it it's been very, very instructive to me as a white settler individual to work with Jill and with Jen and with Mark Turner who works with the Inuit nations of the North a great deal, and to speak about the sense of ownership that is really a movement amongst, you know, in ethics. In oral histories and in folk culture and folk studies, but in Aboriginal and First Nation studies. And yes, your problem is everybody's problem. I have that problem all the time, not being able to have access to my own materials, not being able to have access or giving things and then having them given back and saying, oh, we don't know them anymore. They're going to go in the garbage. Many's the colleague I have, many colleagues of all kinds who have donated their materials, their material possessions to an archive, and then find out that they've all been not just culled, but thrown out wholesale. They're gone. Absolutely gone. You can't leave them alone for a minute because they're not yours anymore. And then conversely, as you pointed out, you go back and you can't actually have access or make use of them yourself. And this, I think, is just a huge problem. But it is of course true for all archives and archivists, I think. But it is particularly true for performance archives because the performances come from an oral performative culture. They come from a culture where the thing is created in that moment. I realize that that's true of all culture, but it's especially true of performance culture. So you've got all of this material, and it's already sort of one step removed from the original performance, the theater piece that you've done, the dance. And then you come back and you can't access the material that's one step removed. It's a reason for the existence of gatherings to try to discuss that, to resolve that. And I'll stop there, sorry.
Hi, everyone. This is Jenny speaking. I'm joining the table to actually stand in proxy for Kelsey Jacobson, who's finally joined us after a magnitude of technical problems. So welcome, Kelsey. And she's phoning in, which means that she's not able to put up her thumb or anything like that. But she's here and she'd like to join the table.
Hi, everyone. I hope that you can hear me. This is Kelsey Jacobson speaking. I'm a white settler woman, and I'm speaking to you today from Toronto. So first of all, my apologies that I've had so much trouble connecting. I really feel terribly for that, but I'm hoping that I'm not repeating things. But I wanted to touch on this question of ethics and problems. And like so many people, I've been deeply grateful to learn from Jill and from everyone else on the Gatherings project. And I've really been rethinking ownership. My project right now is using a lot of audience voices in terms of audience reviews of shows, especially in terms of Twitter. So I've been using a lot of tweets. And for me, the question has been that is, legally, the legal ethical framework is that that's all publicly accessible data. But obviously that's not the ethical framework that I want to work from. And so when I'm thinking about audience voices and audience tweets, basically audience writing, I'm trying to think about how to work that into my writing and into my ethical practice. So I actually, for my latest project, ended up contacting Twitter users individually via message to say, I'd like to cite you in my paper. Do you want to be cited? How would you like to be cited? Asking questions like this. And I was anticipating that people would not be interested at all. But every person that I contacted was really eager to be a part of it. Like there was a desire to feel that they were contributing. Yeah?
Sorry, Jenny speaking. We're doing live captioning, and our live captioners are still learning. So would you, with love and respect, just slow down a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so sorry, captioners. I think I'm almost to the end of my point, but really just to say, I'm trying to think about ethical framework in relation to audiences in the archive. What does it look like to have their voices contribute to the archive? How do we do that ethically? And how do I rethink ownership in a context of
audience reviews or audience self-archiving. Sorry for that meandering, and apologies, captioners. That's the end of my thoughts.
Hi, friends. It's Laura again, Laura Lucci. And this is a little sort of all over the place, but one of the problems that I find with archives, with libraries, comes up in my question of affiliation. So I finished my degree, I left Toronto, and fortunately now, thank you, Stephen Johnson and the Gatherings Partnership for taking me on as a research assistant. So I have access now to digital collections. But in the intervening time, when I was an independent scholar, there seems to be this question of hierarchy, not just of access in general, but the degree to which you're allowed to access. So I haven't changed as a person or as an intellectual, but it all comes down to, do my emails get answered when I'm asking about an item? Do people take me seriously when I'm talking about the items that I'm engaging with? And I don't know that I have an end to this question, but that's one of the problems and one of the things that comes up again and again. It seems, the moment when you need access the most, when you're sort of out on your own, is when you get cut off. And I think it does go back to the question that people have raised earlier in the conversation about not just what are the archives for, but who are the archives for? And I think that's the end of my rambling, meandering thought, but it is what it is. So thank you.
This is Alana speaking. I'll just jump in, Laura, to say thank you so much for raising that point. And as someone who's currently in that precarious space without an affiliation, I am really feeling that. And it's hard. So thank you.
Yes, it seems the moment you become a citizen, private citizen, you can lose access. And isn't that strange? Because again, it brings me back to what's it all for? Is it not for the people who come after, right? Is it not the legacy that is left to an Appalachian community? Is it not the legacy that is left to an Anishinaabe community, an Oneida community, a Mohawk community, an Italian-Canadian community, a Ukrainian-Canadian community? Is it not to inspire, excite, educate, inform, connect all the citizens of these communities, as well as those of us who, have made this, are privileged enough and have been privileged enough to make this a job, a career, a major, a primary life way, whether we are affiliated with an institution or not. We've made it our life way and career. And also, for the theater people themselves, actors, performers, directors, set designers, are they not all researchers? Dramaturgs? Paula could speak to that. Yeah, we could all speak to that. We all have to, if we're creating a show, we're researching. And wouldn't it be nice, this speaks, I suppose, to a broader thing. I suppose one solution or, one Band-Aid is that this is a service that we can provide to our research partners. For now, as people with access, we can offer our research partners access through us and with us. But perhaps We could also offer advocacy. Perhaps we could offer advice and advocacy and consultation to some of these places and offer other suggestions for other ways of being an archive. Let's, Jill is finished.
Hi, this is Paula. I think I'm hearing two different ends of a spectrum here with Kelsey, what you're saying about Twitter and contacting people who really want to participate, people who are not necessarily aware that they are the archive. And as soon as they find out that they are, they want to be in publicly together in the research forum. And yet I really sort of the swing to the other end where either you're in or you're out, either you're an academic or you're not. And if you are, you can get in. And if you aren't, you're just not. And I came to it, it's why I'm new to the archive now, because for 30 years working as a dramaturg, I got to a point where I never even thought about going to the archive, like like in an institutional sort of way, because who would let me in? So for me, the archive when I was working as a dramaturg was so often about the living archive. That was the way that I could get access to the information that I needed. And then when I sort of entered academia, a whole new world opened up. And so from, you know, the other end of that, Laura, I really can appreciate what you're addressing here, and this question of who is it for, and which may apply to Kelsey's question too, in terms of like the Twitter field. So I don't know how that summarizes in an observation exactly, but maybe it's got something to do with the ethical question of around ownership and accessibility. And I guess there are reasons for why there are sort of membership, access, ideas of ownership, but I think they could take on some pretty heavy questions right about now. Now in time, I mean, not necessarily right here and now with us, but I think about that a lot. That's the end of my thought.
Hi, folks. This is Lisa speaking. And the recent conversation has me thinking about how access and the way archives determine access seem to be, and I have no proof for this, seem to be determined by who they believe their audiences to be, and that might be a way that a group like Gatherings might be able to intervene. If you're only providing access to academics, for instance, you're assuming that, well, the key difference between the archive and the exhibit being that the things in the archive still need some kind of interpretation. And so who you're allowing access seems to be based on who you think can interpret this to an audience. And if we can broaden an archive's understanding of who would benefit from access, that artists too can interpret objects, that people with community relationships too can interpret objects, that it's not only the academic or the historian, academic specifically, that can make this object say something to a broader audience. I wonder if that's an intervention or a service that we can provide, not just talking to archives about like different practices around ownership, but also bringing to them what we've observed in our meetings and in our meetings with research partners about just the desire that's out there that the archivists may not yet be aware of because of the way that the barriers are set up. And that is the end of my current thought.
Hi, this is Kelsey speaking again, and apologies if I've jumped on anyone because I'm just kind of going blind. And a reminder to myself verbally to speak
more slowly. Thank you, Paula, for articulating that so well. I really feel like a big question for me is what archives already exist that aren't recognized as such, and how can we invite those in so that the people who are creating them or audiencing them are actively involved in this process of archiving. Yes, when I say Twitter, I think we all have a lot of different thoughts, and thinking of Twitter as an archive immediately maybe doesn't make sense. But that's where a huge number of people are commenting on things, making assessments, making connections. So there's already a kind of self-archiving happening. And like Lisa saying, I think that the invitation is so almost there to bring that into wider conversation, to help encourage folks to see themselves as archivists, even their sort of minute or everyday participation. That's the end of my current thought.
I think it's Jill here. Jumping on Kelsey's question, and also on Stephen, some of the observations that have come up, my own and Stephen's, about, Stephen's contribution about things being thrown away. Discovering all your stuff was trashed by the archive. Again brings up, well, who is the arbiter? Well, we're seeing the arbiter being the formation of the arbiter of history. Who was important enough, influential enough to be preserved? Who is, authoritative enough, relevant enough to be consulted by current and future generations, and then who makes that decision? Are we? And I don't mean we at this table, I mean we, the academic community, making that decision? Are the communities being represented within these archives? Are they making the decisions? One of my big ideas, which has actually scared when I brought it up to, I recently had the opportunity to bring this up to an organization that has a material archive that wants to digitize that archive, and it's an archive for an indigenous, very important indigenous individual, Anishinaabe individual. And one suggestion I had, because really I don't know much about archives. Oops, I'm learning. But one suggestion, and I'm very naive. So one suggestion I thought of, I said, why don't you have, because they were asking me, and I brought in a colleague about, how they might curate this sort of digital archive. And I was like, I don't know. But I said, I have a suggestion. I said, why don't you host a great archive party and invite to this party the elders and the chief and council from this individual's community. This individual is passed. This individual's family, whoever remains, is living from the family. young people from the community, or people also, because this person did a great deal of work in Toronto, people from Toronto, you know, a list could be made. In fact, a list of this individual's widow could make that list, you know, of people that should be invited to the Great Archive Party. I said, photocopy, make multiple copies of everything you have. They have several boxes of paper. Make multiple copies. Have a huge place, like a stadium, practically. Put out all these photocopies with markers and blank paper and note paper and stickies and whiteboards, and let people go crazy. Bring food, have a feast, and have people sit down, community people sit down and look at, review, see all this stuff. And you will see that elders will say, oh, you know, this connects with this. The connections that the archivist will not see will be seen by the community members. The connections between, you know, for instance, this person not only wrote academic and historic papers, but which some published, some unpublished, but this person wrote a great deal of poetry, short story, artwork. And then there's all sorts of, you know, paraphernalia from events that this person started and hosted, and activations and all sorts, you know, everything, and organizations this person began. I said, these people will see the connections, will draw these fine connections, and also see through Anishinaabe eyes. Because often we structure our thought and our narratives differently from Western structures. What may seem, you know, perfectly logical and sensible, well, we'll go, you know, this way, or we'll organize by these themes, or we'll organize, you know, in this timeline. We may organize in spirals, circles within circles within circles, and connections all over. And they said, try it, you know, have this big party. Invite all these people who may have never seen some of these materials, but who will, and let them guide you on how this archive could be. Well, boy, did I see these big saucer eyes of terror. And I thought, uh-oh, I am not being invited to this party ever again, am I? I'm done here. But they were very gracious. And of course, then, you know, COVID happens. And so the Great Archive Party has not occurred. But I hope that it will. But again, because, you know, I came to understand, and this is one thing I didn't understand, that as I understand now, that the way the box arrives is the way they keep the box. But that doesn't, you know, and that seems like a really good thing, because that might mean, you know, if someone has said, well, I want to put my legacy in order, and so I'm going to organize it for you in the way that it should be read. But sometimes, I don't know, if you were me, maybe, this is a shameful admission, you might just throw everything in the box and think, well, someone else will curate this or sort this out, or we'll all get to it later. But for now, I just need it because of whatever. I'm not sure. Or after someone dies, someone may care, but they may not have organized it quite in the way that the person who collected these materials, you know, may have ultimately wished. So we don't know, and I'm not saying we have to throw away the organization in the box, but there may be alternative ways of displaying, so that there's multiple ways, especially if you're going from material to digital. But that's a thought I'm having in terms of who, you know, people curating how they would read the legacy. And also, you know, again, thinking about, well, who decides what's important? and what is worth keeping and what might be valuable. And this is not helpful, so I'll stop.
Could I just say, just very briefly, Jill, we've talked about this before, um, this idea that you have, which I think is a fantastic idea, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say that probably everybody in attendance here thinks it's a great idea. I really do fail to comprehend why there was a resistance to that, except that the people who are resisting it felt that somehow one would supplant the other. Like you're talking about providing copies of everything to everyone for them to write on. And I'm no doubt recording the conversations that people have. This is all part and parcel of that contextualized research that both researchers and archivists normally would like to have, except that there's this fear that the box will disappear then. And if you don't have the box in its original provenance, in its original configuration, somehow that's the end of it. And I just fail to understand why one is such a, one endangers the other. And yet, absolutely, it's true that there is that sense. Long-standing, it's a long-standing difficulty, and it came from somewhere, but I don't know from where. It's the end of my thought.
Jill here. We don't know the provenance of the idea. Sorry, a bad 8-year-old's joke. I'm sorry, but it's my 8-year-old coming out. Thought, bad joke finish.
Hi, Jill. Tony. Just to piggyback on what you were saying earlier, whom are they for and who decides? A case in point is the Multicultural History Society of Ontario that used to be housed at U of T at the St. George campus. And they were leasing a big room in a building, Queen's Park, near Queen's Park. And somehow they were forced out of St. George campus and are now, they have migrated their stuff since 2003 in various locations, which includes amazing recorded interviews with many members of the so-called diverse community, including German Canadians, Japanese Canadians, Italian Canadians who were interned during the Second World War. And these recordings now are actually deteriorating in rooms that have no climate control, nothing. And again, this idea that they were left to their own to come up with funds. They could hardly make rent, I think, during the time that they were at U of T. And then gradually, when the lease ended, they wouldn't renew the lease. And now, another problem is that the whole notion of multicultural, euphemistically used as the other, as opposed to Canadian, with all the problems that means to the Indigenous people, I think facilitated this notion that it did not really meet the standard of a serious archive. It related to the others and therefore could, it could be moved somewhere else and fend for itself. And now I think a lot of material is deteriorating. Last I spoke with the person curating. End of thought.
Miigwech for sharing that, Tony. It's Jill speaking. I had no idea about this archive that had been at U of T or what's happening. I mean, that will be a terrible loss, I think. I believe to Canada, to the history and to the descendants of those people who made those recordings. We are at 2:35, so I would like to invite us now, anybody who's here, a witness or someone now sitting at the table, to join the table and speak if there are any last words. or once those last words are spoken, or any last thoughts that you'd like to get in, I would then like to continue into the, I suppose, very last, the aperitif. I guess people have aperitifs after their dessert. I'm not sure. I've never had one, so wouldn't know. But I think we have a plan to close out the round table, and our plan will be this. We will spotlight Adriana once our last thoughts are have been spoken. And Adriana will take us through a recap and show us her wonderful graphic recording. And then and if you have questions, for Adriana, those will be invited. And then Stephen will close the event, speaking more about gatherings. Your real host, I'm just the proxy here. And before I sign off and hand it over the last words, I'd love to thank, of course, Stephen, Jen, a lovely captioner, Jenny Salisbury, a lovely captioner, Lisa Akins, a lovely captioner, Matt Jones, your lovely captioner, Gabrielle Houle, who translated our documents for us and also offered some wonderful thoughts at the table, and also has been here standing by to help out with any translation. I'd like to say a big chimagwech to all of you for taking 3 hours out of this beautiful day to join us. So I will not speak again. I say chimagwech and bamampi. I will turn it to any last thoughts, and then if there are none, Adriana will step in, and then Stephen. So thank you so much. Bamampi. See you later.
Hi, everyone. This is Colleen Danaher speaking. Thank you so much for the conversation that we've had so far. It's been really a pleasure listening in. I was actually just about to write my comments in the chat bar and then leave because I must leave soon, but I thought this would be a nice way to say hello and also include my comment, which was, I wonder, hearing all of our conversations today, I wonder if it would be helpful to think about history itself as a technology of capture and not just archiving and archival practice. And when I say that, I'm saying that inspired by the work of particular scholars and thinkers who really believe radically that the project of history making itself should be in service of the present. So I think we have been asking these questions, who are archives for? What do archives do? But I also think that we can and should be asking, who is history for? Whose history? For whom, right? And so these ethical questions haunt just not the archive, but also history making as a practice. And that opens up to me a lot of valuable questions about not just do we or don't we, or how to engage archives, but who is approaching the archive with what kinds of questions. So if we already take for granted that history making is a document of those in power, then there's also very powerful ways of thinking through the archive as ethnographic evidence of those who are in power, which is its own kind of scholarly output. So that's the end of my thought, and I thank you all again for provoking such rich conversation.
Jenny speaking. I just see on
On my list here, Maria, did you come back to the table? Did you have a thought that you wanted to share with us? Oh, I did, and then I forgot it.
Oh,
thank you. You know something. Something. Jill, when you said what happens to us happens to everyone, I did sort of think about the fact that I spend a lot of time in archives, and sometimes I just go, like even when I'm not sanctioned as a scholar or something, I just make some excuse to go. And they're not healthy places physically. They lack out oxygen, and these sort of dead and dying papers, we're inhaling those when we're in there. And it's often a place where, when spending time in the archive, people actually feel quite sickened sometimes by the mold. And so it just occurred to me that is, it's an embodied experience to be in the archive. Sometimes it's very cold. It can give you, like if you got arthritis, it will destroy you. So anyway, I just thought I would say that it's this sort of way of approaching history, which is really weird in a way. Like we, as settlers, we destroy history, we kick over the traces, we deny it, we try to retell it, we do all these terrible things, and then try to store it in this place, which is actually, it's physically very bad for anybody to spend a lot of time in the archive. Anyway, just thought I'd say that. Thank you, Maria. The table is open for other final thoughts. Something that you want to make sure stays in our archive, in our memory of this conversation. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone unmute. By my watch, it is 2:43, so we just have a little bit over 15 minutes before our time together is done. We were going to take one more break, but we're going to apologize and say, hopefully you can stay with us for another 15 minutes, and then we will take our break, because we really do want to hear from Adriana, and then we want to hear from Stephen. So our sincere, oh, yes, Jill?
Yeah, I'm just going to break in. It's Jill here. Adriana, I'm sorry, we don't have break time, but I'm wondering if you would like a break, perhaps I could ask, before you present, I could ask Stephen to take 5 minutes and speak about gatherings and let Adriana close us out. So you could turn off your screen, take a little break, Adriana, if you wish, gather your thoughts.
May I interrupt to say to Adriana, do you need a little time, or because I have very little to say?
I'm okay either way. I think we're good to go. If you want to go first, we can do that. Or yeah, I won't take a full break. I might just look at it for a little bit so that I know what I'll say.
Okay, that's good then I can speak. Is that all right? Shall I go ahead then?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Hello. Thank you. And Adriana, you're on break for 5 minutes. Sorry.
Look, I really, to me, my function here was to introduce the Gatherings Project or conclude with something about the Gatherings Project. But I have to say that what we've talked about for the last 3 hours has been an embodiment of the Gatherings Project. So what would I say exactly? And also there's a website you can look at. This is a project that is meant to be an open discussion and an examination of the relationship between the performance researcher and the archives, broadly defined, including interviews, oral histories, the documentary evidence. The effort is to look at the extent to which the kinds of archives we use defines what performance research is, and how the performance research defines what kinds of archives we use and how they're organized. And that's a complex discussion, as we just found out. It's also meant to discuss the health and safety, I guess, maybe, of the performing arts document of all kinds, oral and written, within the archive. You know, and I did say this earlier, and Jill has articulated, a number of you articulated extraordinarily well, that the document relating to performance is a little different than other kinds of documents, where it's sort of at one remove to the thing itself that we're trying to talk about, which is the performance. And sometimes the archive, because most often that archive is not devoted to the performing arts, it's another kind, it has another function. And yet there are these things sitting there. My fallback position is always the Perth, Ontario archive, which has all sorts of scripts and costumes related to a local theater company from the early 20th century. And they have no idea what to do with those materials. They know they're important, but they require a particular kind of attitude that they don't otherwise have. And I've had this discussion with a number of people involved in gatherings. We're also here to provide a service to people who are endeavoring to conduct the research they are doing now and that we've been talking about, and it has to do with permissions and access and the use of documents. I really, it's very much what we've been talking about. It's a partnership development grant that we got through SSHRC, which allowed us to begin this process, but it's not only about a SSHRC grant. What we would hope is that that it's something that can provide a service that will be ongoing after that grant's over. And that's very much what I have to say. I just want to thank everyone for being so very much involved in this conversation, and for a very, very good conversation. I've learned a lot. Thanks a lot. And now I'll turn it over to Adriana, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Thank you, Stephen. Adriana, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, I'm going to spotlight Adriana's screen, and I encourage you to, if it hasn't become big on your screen, to change to speaker view from, in case you're in gallery view. But there you go, Adriana, you are all set.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here with you. I'll walk through the recording and give you some of the highlights that I gathered from the conversation. So I'll start on this, I guess it will be top right corner for you, with just the flowers that were at the center of the story that Jill told us at the beginning, and that invitation to be both courageous, to be generous, and to move forward with perseverance, which I think it's a great invitation for the work that all of you are doing and are embarking on with gatherings. And I began on this next section with that element of the human aspect of the archives and how essential that is. And I felt that we kept coming back to that. So it began kind of on the surface with the knowledge holders, the archivists, and those who care for collections. But it evolved also to talk about community and the need for open doors, and then the embodied experience of the embodied archive. But then at the end, we were brought back to the same idea of like, that even accessing the archive is an embodied experience. And I used to work caring for a collection, and I can definitely, when that was mentioned, my brain took me back to being in that vault, taking care of those objects. So it's not written yet, but it'll come over here. And then a huge part of the conversation was around access And so that's why that is front and center here. The question of what is the archive for? Who gets to access it? How and why? And then other bigger questions that came up, whose knowledge do archives prioritize? So who decides what's important? And that came up in many parts, so you'll see it in a few more sections. And then the relationship to the objects themselves. I just kept on adding some of those questions because I think those are very relevant and they'll continue to come up. So the idea of objects being inanimate and whether or not we need to question that, and also how technology has changed that relationship and being able to photograph, expand that access to the archive, and if the idea of taking those photos makes that object more important, which I think was mentioned. And something that is not here yet, it's the personal archive. I think that's something that I will add here later on. And then on my far right, your left, I guess, the invitation to think about what are new ways to relate to the archive and what is the role of the scholars to be advocates and to open doors for communities, and how that will in place also allow for the recognitions that communities are experts and they can make connections that no one else can. And I will end with that.
Many thanks, Adriana. What a beautiful, beautiful archive you've created for us. What a beautiful document. Does anybody, we have a few more minutes. I forgot to thank Erin Hurley, Nicole and Sylvain and the CATR for all of the help they gave us and advice they gave us to put this together. So I wanted to do that before we go. But before we actually go, are there any comments or questions that you have at the table for Adriana? Jill finished.
I was just wondering about not things like objects necessarily, like I guess non-material. I can't say things, so I'm not sure what the word is, but that cannot be archived because they're not objects. So, you know, performance is ephemeral. So I'm just wondering about what cannot be archived, or is there another way of thinking of the archive in this case? That's just a question I have.
Other thoughts from people? I think that's a very important point, and I think it did come up in the conversation because so much is ephemeral, and it goes to these very different ways of relating to an archive. You know, there's an embodied presence. There's an effort to make the artifact something that's material and also ahistorical. It exists at a very particular moment and it can't change over time. And then there's the kind of historical object, including not the object, but the performance itself, the memory of the performance, that does change over time and is passed along from person to person. Anyway, I'll stop there.
This is Jenny speaking. A theme that's been coming up for me over the course of this conversation, and Adriana, I'm so moved by your work, is the relationship between life and life cycles and the archive. So Jill, I'm thinking about your conversation around objects being alive and the cruelty of being asked to live forever, the torture of immortality. And I'm thinking about, Paula, what you had to say about rocks being alive. And in that, to be alive also means to be able to die. When the power to die has been taken away, you're no longer alive. And so if we think of archives as living history, and we think of them as a place where we can go to get, so thinking about your story, Jill, a place to go and get the medicine we need for right now, the necessary medicine we need, the knowledge of our ancestors, the knowledge of the people who've come before us to address a problem or an experience we're having now as we build towards our futures. All of that is in these cycles of being the young people who are searching, questioning, asking, shaking, becoming the knowledge holders, and then passing those knowledge holders on, and how archives take those cycles too, of collections, like collecting material, holding material, and then passing them on to the next generation. And if we think of them as life cycles, and that archives live inside those cycles, then at what point are we intervening in any particular archive, and at what point is the archive in the cycle, and is our search in the cycle? That's what I've been thinking about in all of this. And so, Adriana, I love how your work is so vibrant with life and flowers and people and boats in the river. So thank you for that. That's the end of my thought.
Are there any more thoughts for Adriana? Any final words from you, Jill?
I'm speechless.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Too.
It's
a thing of beauty, and I can see in the comments that you're getting rave reviews, Sarah, Adriana. Look at that. And it's really a wonderful thing and a wonderful idea to do, Jill. In that case, then, is it my place here to wish everyone a very fine rest of the afternoon and evening, and good weather, and stay safe to everyone. This has been a wonderful event, and I really appreciate it. I am moved. So let's say goodbye then, shall we? The administrators can say goodbye. Thanks, everyone. Take care of yourselves.